So to begin with, I've been, just as some background, I am Sir Marcus. I am from the Biting Winds in Connecticut, and I'm looking to teach everybody how to build good, safe swords using some of the tips and tricks I've picked up from a number of different people over countless years. So some of the, like most people use a lot of the same stuff. Most people are going to be using things like pipe insulation, blue foam, packing tape, strapping tape, weldwood DAP, which is contact cement, and they all use them in different ways. The two main cores that I work with are golf club type cores. One thing I did find when I was going through my stash of cores today is there are a very small proportion of golf club cores that look like carbon fiber cores, but are in fact titanium aluminum cores, and or magnesium aluminum cores. And they look like fiberglass on the outside, but when you cut into them, they put off a spark, and they are wholly inappropriate for our game. The other type of core is kite spar. I typically work with 505 kite spar from Goodwin's or 524 kite spar from Goodwin's. I prefer it because it's got a straight, it is a straight one as opposed to, as you can probably see on the golf club, a taper. I'm not sure if you can see quite there. I've cut mine down pretty far, so there's not a lot of taper there. Oh, hold up. Let me add somebody else. All right. Hi, Chris. All right. So back to where I was at. Also, if folks in chat could put their game name and park information, we are giving credit through Biting Winds for official ANS Day. And back to where I was at. Got off track there. So two different cores I use: golf club, kite spar. I'm going to demonstrate with each of them how to put things together. I'm also going to demonstrate how to use what is called a flat blade kit. I used to sell these, so I've got a couple left over. You can get them from a couple different vendors, but they make a really easy. They are a really easy way to make a flat blade that is Amtgard legal and very durable. So to begin with, to go over your different materials. So the most common swords you're going to find on most fields nowadays are going to be black pipe insulation. I get mine from a guy out in Rising Winds. I will share that with the link I think he's got a website now. But the nice thing about these is they don't have any slit in them. They're custom built to be 2.5 inches across with a 1/2 inch diameter center hole. So they are, just a straight slide on unit, but they are the same material as you would get from Frost King or Zorro or any of the major manufacturers that manufacture pipe insulation. They function the same as Fun Noodle used to. I don't recommend Fun Noodle anymore because Fun Noodle is made that as the cost of petroleum has gone up, the amount of petroleum byproducts they've used in pool noodle has decreased. So you get more air and less polymer. And so pool noodle, even if you can find it in the right specs, just falls apart. It is, in my opinion, from building for a long time, it's not really appropriate for anything used other than say courtesy padding anymore. But if you can find it, it is often inexpensive. As long as you build it with the understanding that it's going to need to be replaced regularly, it's still a nice, quick way to build a sword, and it makes a really nice light tournament sword. So going from there, this type of foam which forgive the kind of dog-eared nature of this has been in my rafters for about 5 years. but I'm using it for an example. This is what's called cross-linked polyethylene foam. Hi there, Tulik. I don't know if you can hear me yet. So this is cross-linked polyethylene foam. It is a 1.2 pound foam, and it's very soft. It's very soft, but it's very, very durable. Like the damage that I've got on that edge there is from dragging it across a nail, bringing it out of the rafters. It, by and large, is very, very, very durable and will last a long time. And then there's a couple ways to apply this that are different from using fun noodle. So to begin with, the first thing you need to do when you're building a sword is core prep. If you are using glue, you need to sand your cores. You also need to cut your cores to length. With kite spar in particular, you want to make sure you use a fine-tooth hacksaw or a diamond blade to on a Dremel to cut it to length, which I already did. And then I do a prep that is not terribly common, but I find it shockingly useful for making sure you don't core out your sword, or less likely to core out your sword. And so you can see I'm peeling this blue tape off of here. What I've done is I've used that as kind of a little cofferdam to, if I can get it to come loose, and I can't, let's try the other side, is to use hot glue to make a tip on the end of the core. You can see it's nice and sturdy, but it's also flexible. The key there is that flexibility means when you're building, you don't run as much of a risk of the core cutting into the foam when you're building. It's as simple as wrapping masking tape around there, like you can see, and then you just want to have about 1/4 inch of it sticking out the top, and you cut it off flush, and it gives a nice forgiving tip for your sword. And then you build just like you would with any other core. For example, I've actually prepped all of these this way. And I guess the first one I'll go over is the flat blade. You know what? We'll go over an Omni first, because that is the one that most people build as the first sword. So going with a golf club, going with a couple ways. So one of the problems with golf clubs, and it's not necessarily a problem, there are some advantages to it, but there are also some disadvantages to having a tapered core. So the advantage of a tapered core is the geometry is such that your weight ends up in your pommel more so than the tip. The disadvantage is with the taper, with your fun noodle, with your pipe insulation, it has a straight, bore to it. It's a 1/2 inch here, it's a 1/2 inch here. And so if your core is not, if your core has a taper to it, you end up with a little bit of gap there. What I do, a lot of people do what they call rattle stuffs. So you put a little piece of foam like that and you tape it on there. What I have found is more effective than a rattle stop is to do a thing called, is to do a helix. You spiral it down lightly, you get it nice and tight, and you tape it down. I use packing tape because packing tape is light and it's durable enough for our purposes. Hold please while I get this tape to loosen up for me. Does anybody have any questions while I'm getting this tape working? So all we do, start up at the top, on like this, work our way down, just like that. Doesn't need to be every spot, like you will end up not being perfect, but for the purposes of what we're doing, it doesn't matter because it's going to be all the way on the inside. And I typically do the top 10, 12 inches, just to be on the safe side. And then you just do it like that, and you get a little top at the top there so it doesn't. Now, the purpose of this is to kind of buffer that out. Like I said, there is a downside to using tapered cores with straight foam, in that it causes premature wear where the core rattles away. With this, it's not perfect because you are, it is not exactly, it's not touching there, but it provides enough surface area that you can, and you want it nice and tight because you want it to stay on. It's nice and tight. You need less tape, you need less force, and like that's not coming off now. So like you can see, I've got it pushed through right to where you can see the tip of the core is there. And then that's where we add our foam. I think technically by the build specs, you can get by with just actually no, you need 1 inch of foam. These are, I specifically ordered blue foam that is a 1/2 inch. Typically you will need 3 of these versus the 2 that are on there currently. A trick for cutting ring circles that are nice and consistent is a metal retention band for a standard size ball canning jar. They are just over 2.5 inches across. You can see they fit nicely over top there. They've got a little bit of extra there that I'll need to cut down, but by and large, they are very, very consistent. Another trick, foam, because of for whatever reason, the cellular nature of foam wears out knife blades, and scissors, and all that. I like 18 millimeter black snap blades because when they wear out, I literally just throw them out. And unlike, they give you a nice long blade and they let you have a nice consistent sharp edge that you can whittle down your foam with, and you can make it work well. So I have always been strong on safety for our weapons. There is a failure point right here where the cap meets this, where if someone is not careful, you can shear that off and then you have an exposed core. So something I prefer to do with my gear is I use strapping tape, and I will put a piece of strapping tape over right between the foam and the core, because then you are effectively bonding the core to the foam. So even if the cap fails, the core is still encased in the foam, and so you're less likely to hurt someone. Obviously, you could still hurt someone, but the goal at all times is to be as safe as we can. And that's kind of a philosophy I've always built into my designs, is to build something to be, failure proof, because I know at some point something's going to fail. I had a squire have a core come out one time and got a C-shaped scar over his eye from a pole arm. And I want to make sure that anything I build is going to be safe for anybody who's using it. So like you see, I've shaved this down a little bit. And then what I do there is, once again, I take strapping tape. Now I'm using Scotch's, I think it's called Extreme strapping tape. Instead of just having the straight line across it, it has a crosshatch to it. It's a pain in the butt to work with, but with the nylon crosshatch in it, it makes it really extremely durable. And again, with my, kind of fanaticism on safety, I find that provides a, just a extra protective thing to the part of the sword that's going to break down the most. The tip is where you have the most, the most physics applied to it. And so what I'll do is I'll just run it there like that down both sides. That puts your cap on. And then for good measure, I will do starting from the top up here, 1, 2, with a little bit of overlap, 2, and 3. The reason I do this is that top 6 inches is typically where you're going to end up with a failure on a sword. By doing that there, that's going to provide your most durable tip to your sword. And then you just want to do it lightly. You don't want to pack it down. You still want it still gives nicely. It's still soft. It's still safe. Well, I mean, it's meant to be safe, but it's still you're not gonna end up with a situation where your sword is too stiff for somebody to use. And it's just how I've found building them over the years to make a sword that is durable. It lasts for the appropriate amount of time for the effort put into it. And it is going to provide something safe so I don't beam somebody and poke somebody's eye out or something. So the next step on this that I do is using the thinnest packing tape you can find. I use the Duck light duty packing tape. Any brand will work. There is a difference between light duty and heavy duty. And you want something that's got kind of the consistency of cellophane or like cling wrap. And what you do is you line it up here, and you take it all the way down to the length of it. You're trying to get it as smooth as you can. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it as smooth as you can because you're basically making a tape seal over the whole length of this thing. And you work your way around, overlapping about 1/2 inch. And you just continue repeating every around until you seal the whole thing in. You start where the tape overlaps and you work your way over, and you just kind of roll it around with the palms, get it nice and flat all the way along there. And the purpose of that is, so oftentimes foam will, depending on what you're hitting, like if you're fighting people with armor, if you're fighting in the trees and you hit a tree branch or something, oftentimes you'll get little shear lines in the foam that will cause it to prematurely break down. By adding this little layer of tape on the outside, you dramatically increase the durability of it. You also increase the water resistance of it by a little bit. And so just in general, a little extra effort, it's by no means required, but that little extra effort there just gives a nice skin on the foam and increases your durability of your gear. So it takes, for a typical sword, I think it takes 5 strips. Might be 6. Just take it down like that. All right. So we've got this covered like this. You want to put one little strip up at the top just to make sure it doesn't, so everything stays in place. Because over time, the edges of the paper things will wear out. And so you just want to put a little bit up there. You don't want to torque any of this. You want to put it on just as light as you can. So it's just the glue that's holding it on, not any pressure, except for this step. So the next step I do is I'll take my blade and I will cut a little bit off here, making a little kind of spiral, giving a little bit of taper. It's not critical to do it, but with high quality foam, it doesn't compress as easily as like say fun noodle does. But so you cut that down there to a little bit of a taper. And now starting about 4 inches up on the sword, you put the tape on like this, you wrap it like this, the loop going, and then you start to spiral it down. I spiral it down to about the width of the roll, and that's when I start putting pressure. And then you use the heel of your hand to wrap, and this is where you're torque wrapping it. And you wrap it, and you can see how this taper comes in. And then you work it down onto the handle. And you get nice, tight grip on there. If you do it right, this is really durable, and you'll have to cut the tape to take it off when you are, when you need to record the sword. But for all intents and purposes, this is done. It just needs a cover and it needs a pommel. I'll go over pommels on one of the other swords. Does anybody have any questions since we've got here?
If you want to put quillions on, at what point would you do that and how would you attach them?
Okay, so there's a couple different ways to do that. It really depends on how you want to use your quillions and how you want to build your quillions. For me, what I typically do is I wouldn't do that on a golf club sword just because there's enough going on with the pommel or with the handle and all that. But on, say, a fiberglass sword, kite spar, what you do for a nice durable one, and I'll do another class on that because I didn't prep for that. But what I do is I take a piece of PVC, I cut it on my band, I cut it in half on my bandsaw, like you're trying to get the marrow out of the bone. You just cut it straight down the middle. 1/2-inch PVC is good. You can even go with CPVC. And then you put it in you make it basically double the length you want. So say you want a, you want a 6-inch crossguard on there. So for that, if you want to say a 6-inch long crossguard, 3 inches on each side, I'd cut a 12-inch piece of PVC, I'd cut it in half. I'd put that half in the oven at about 225 degrees for long enough until it has the consistency of like pasta. PVC is a thermoplastic, and the chloride in it will break down above about 230, 240 degrees. So you want to keep it at that lower, just above boiling point of water, but below about 240, so that it doesn't discolor, because then it'll get brittle. But if you can keep it in that sweet range, it takes on this consistency of basically pasta. And then what you do is you fold it over. I'll demonstrate with a piece of blue foam. So what you do is you take it, you put it over here, and you twist, and you twist, and you hold pressure on it until it cools down to the point where it'll hold its shape. So the PVC, once it gets down below about 150 degrees, will retain its shape indefinitely. You just want to twist that nice and tight so it basically locks onto this on there. And once it's on there, then you tape it up, you get a roughly round shape, and then you can cover it with foam. You can put, gamma balls on it, however you want to finish the end of it. I will do I'll plan to do another class for that, say next week, to show.
All right, that'll be good. Thank you.
That's an advanced technique. I learned that one from Sir Monkey out of, I think he's in the wetlands. He's from one of the Texas kingdoms, and I remember him doing a video about that like a decade ago. It is also the way to make handles for, say, tonfas, or I've never seen an effectively done scythe, but that would be how I would do a scythe as well. It's about the only way to effectively connect 90 degrees on anything with kite spar, because they don't make fittings for that kind of stuff that is legal for us to use. But yeah, so that's where we are. That's how you build, just a basic boffer. Pommels or however you want to do a pommel. Because I also build arrows, I have these pieces of circular foam that I use for my arrow blanks, and I use my cones for my arrows. I cut them down on a bandsaw to be the right shape, and just socket them on like that and finish them just like you would one of these. I use strapping tape to hold them on, and they're really durable. They make a nice pommel, especially if you like to pommel fight. They make a nice durable one there. But you can also do just like you do on this. You take a 2-inch piece of, you take a 2-inch piece of this. So with golf clubs, I don't like building a pommel over the end of the golf club, so I will take my knife and I will cut end of the blade, the end of the handle off. It's a pain in the butt because they use some weird glue, and you don't want a golf club going flying off when somebody's swinging it. So they're a pain to get off, but basically you cut into it and you get yourself down to a core there. And then again, it sits on there. This is where regular strapping tape as opposed to the fancy strapping tape works well. I don't have the appropriate tape for that, so I'll show with masking tape on what I do. So you go over the top. It actually will show up better on that too. You go over the top a total of 3 times to have 6 strips effectively. It makes a nice stable base. Now this is with strapping tape rather than packing tape, but like I said, I realized I don't have the right strapping tape for that. So you do this basically. And then with Charlie dropped off. It would be delightful if somebody could invent a way for tape to not have to find the end of it every time, I would be eternally grateful. So just like we did on this one here. And this is obviously just a demo, because don't use packing tape for anything that is structurally important. Basically, you just wrap it down just like that. Put your cap on. You only need a 1/2 inch of foam over your pommel. And once that's strapped down, you're completely done other than putting a cover on. Okay, so now this one. So this one is an older sword that I had to take the foam glue out on. So I had to strip it down. This one was originally built with this type of foam, but that was but I used weldwood DAP to glue on. You can see the residue from the DAP on there. You want to clean that up as well as you can. If I were going to DAP this down again, I would apply DAP to the core and then to the foam. I'm, however, actually going to use a new. So one of the tapes that's really useful for building stuff is double-sided carpet tape. You can get it at, I typically get it at Walmart. The Duck brand stuff is really good. This stuff is Robert's Max Grip carpet tape. I have never used it before, so we're going to see how it works. But basically, you run it over the foam. It is reinforced just like the strapping tape. And then what I'm doing here on this one is just getting that all lined up. With this type of build, all you got to do, there is a groove cut into these kits. And all you got to do is run your phone, your core in there. And then you put a little notch right here for a little space. And it folds over so it doesn't get fat. And then you just fold it back over on itself. And you press it together. Now, if you're using DAP, you press it together with the DAP in there. With this fabric tape, you just press it together. You get a good compression. You try to make sure it's nice and straight. And then you have sword.
But then you have to put a cover on it.
We do have to put a cover on it. This type, and you can do this with blue foam. You can do the same style with blue foam. You just fold it over in layers.
Layer?
But then just to make sure that that tape doesn't come loose, I run a strip down the sides of it. And then finish it the same way as any other. You know, you put a little bit of packing tape on it. You make sure the tip is, properly finished, so that it's the right diameter. You don't go through a 2.5 inch ring, and you make sure everything's nice and on there. And otherwise, you're all set. So does anyone have any questions? I've kind of gone through the 2 designs I was going to work on. I think I'm going to have a follow-up class where I teach about how to put quillions on. And I can definitely do a class on teaching people how to sew covers. There's a couple different ways to do that as well. But that's pretty much the content I have for class.
I have a question.
Sure.
If you are planning to make a Madu, I know nobody really makes Madus, but if you were planning to make a Madu, at what point would you place where your ship is going to go?
So, funny you ask, I have a Madu out in my shed, but I definitely know Madus. In general purposes, I do my core first. I build my shield as though I were, as though I were building a shield. Usually what I will, going with the standard double-sided round Madu. There's a lot of other Madu designs, but going with one where it's a shield with a spike on one and a spike on the other. What I do is I will carve out a center section big enough for my fist inside the solid foam. I build my shields almost exclusively with solid foam at this point. But sorry, I had a text come in real quick that I popped up on my phone over here. So I will, with a solid foam core or shield, I'll carve out a space for my knuckles. I'll then route a channel in the shield where I can put the core. So core here, I can hold this longer. So like that. And then what I will do there is using strapping tape. I'll basically make 2 flags on here that can be laid flat, providing a little bit extra durability to the core. Because the problem with when you attach a round core inside a Madu is the shield wants to roll. It's the same problem you have with axes as well. And so you basically put your tape in, you run it. So you put your tape on, hold for a second. Doing a demonstrator with blue tape so you can see it. So you put your tape on like so. Like so. So you see there's a little bit of an extra cross section. And then when you're mounting it to there, you want to use zip ties, like 2 zip ties above your fist, 2 zip ties below your fist to kind of lock that in place. And then you build your handle around there. You wrap your handle around there, and then you put it on there, and then you build your sword. You build your weapon section of it, however you plan to build your weapon section of it. If you're doing one of those style where you've got the shield up at the top and a down spear, you do your padded down spear section. You put your tip on it. You build it that way. If you're doing double-ended, you put your 2 little spikes either way. And it is, you just build it as it is. And the thing you're going to find with building modus, and I would recommend talking to Matt Burloff, over in Portland. He's in Eldamar, I think. He has made a bunch of really cool modus and would be more of an expert than I am. I've made them in an industrial capacity of, I've made a bunch of them to sell. He does them because he likes them and they're cool and he does artwork with them. And he's definitely made way more modus than I have. So I would refer you to Loff for the specific details of it, but I definitely would mount the shield first and then do the blades.
All right, gotcha. Thanks.
All right. Cool. Does anybody have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for joining. Make sure, let's see. Just checking the chat here. Oh, Chris, I see you had your question about what do I think about using DAP on the core. For most of the swords I build that are not that I'm selling, I use DAP on the core. I use DAP on the core for everything. When I am building lots of swords at once, I have to do it in the backyard because otherwise I will poison the rest of the household. Because DAP smells bad. But looking at that, so we've got Tulik from, just to recap everybody there, we've got Cedric from Kerbanog, we've got Tulik from Kerbanog, we had Charlie from, I think, Granite Crown, and we have Kincaid from Biting Winds. With that, if we don't have any more questions, I'm going to call it a night.
Awesome, thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Tulik, I couldn't really hear you.
Oh, I just said thank you.
No problem. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, no problem. It was very informing.
All right. Well, I'm going to see about doing more of these. I think there's a lot to go with teaching people to build stuff and teaching techniques. So I'll post into the kingdom and share and all that. And hope to see you all in future ones. Thanks.
See you
everyone.
one of these Sundays.
Yep. All right.
Okay, thank you. Have a great night.
You too. Bye.